Given the current state of the anime industry, it's virtually impossible for an anime to look perfect, to look exactly the way its creators want it to look without cutting any corners. Regardless of how high profile a project is, regardless of how healthy the production is, there's always something or the other that doesn't quite go to plan. Of course, the degree of things not quite going to plan can differ greatly between projects, but the idea itself is pretty much an undeniable constant, at least in this day and age. From a production standpoint, anime is almost never perfect, but notice how I said almost never. Despite the modern anime industry being a complete, total and utter hellhole that actively crushes artistic expression to the point where new kinds of artistic expression end up getting created just to combat it, despite 99% of modern anime suffering from severe production handicaps, despite most studios having to rely on increased fragmentation and technological alternatives to talent just to keep projects afloat, despite all of that, there exists one company, one studio that throughout its history has maintained a creator-first mindset. A studio that has effectively isolated itself from the rest of the industry just to allow for the healthiest, most creatively adventurous atmosphere possible. A studio that has gone above and beyond to make sure they create art instead of producing a product. This studio, of course, is Kyotoanimation, the gold standard of anime production. Now, I can go on and on about KyoAni, about their history, about the way their projects work, about the talent who works there, etc, and I will at some point. I will make a video about the studio, but for now, let's focus on the newest offering from Kyotoanimation, that being City, the animation. Let's talk about the way it looks, how it came to be, the unique approaches the team took while making it, and more. Make sure to subscribe, that'd be really cool and awesome and nice. You can also become a member of this channel. Members get at least 2 exclusive videos per month, such as these ones here, custom made badges and emojis, shoutouts and more. Just go down there and press the join button. Now, City is stylistically different from your typical KyoAni show in more ways than one. While the studio tends to prioritize meticulous, expressive character acting and lifelike lived-in settings created through extensive location scouting, City calls for a more stylized, cartoony look. It's a stylistic departure from what KyoAni excels at, which led to concerns. Will KyoAni be able to accommodate mangaka Keiichi Arawi's goofy, charming style? Will the studio that's all about making characters feel human and the world they live in feel real be able to make that stylistic pivot? Those were the questions on everybody's minds back in 2010, back when Nichijou got announced. Following the kaleidoscope of visual insanity and all things good and goofy that was Nichijou, KyoAni's ability to adapt Arawi's works was abundantly clear. Yes, they could accommodate his goofy, charming style, yes, they could make that artistic pivot, and yes, I'll get to the point of this video soon. City was destined to be a great adaptation. It had to be, given the staff involved, which included KyoAni Ace and Nichijou's assistant director Taichi Ishidate leading the charge creatively. Now, to create a show like City, you need a lot of resources. An extremely competent director alone isn't enough. You need an extensively skilled staff, more about that in a bit. You need a healthy workflow, you need reasonable schedules, and most importantly, you need a large amount of executive control over the production process. Thankfully, KyoAni is pretty much the only company that can provide all of those things, meaning they are effectively the only entity out there that could have produced City in the manner in which they have. To understand City's production, we need to take a hopefully brief look at how KyoAni operates at a technical level starting from the top. Quick crash course: anime is funded by what's called a production committee, which is basically a hierarchical arrangement of companies based on the amount they've invested into an anime. The company that's ranked the highest has the largest amount of influence over the business end, including the release date, among other things. What KyoAni have been doing for pretty much a decade now is investing in their own shows, making sure they are at the top of each production committee, meaning they themselves get to control their productions, not some external company that only cares about profits. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that allows the studio to foster a creator-first mentality, which, by the way, isn't something you should take for granted. Just because a studio has control over their productions doesn't mean they'll put their staff first. Just look at Chainsaw Man. That project was entirely funded by MAPPA, meaning the studio had control over every aspect of the production process. And what did they do with it? Did they ensure the team had all the time they needed? No, they just shoehorned the project in between Jujutsu Kaisen's production cycle, f***ing up both shows. What KyoAni does is extremely rare, and it's one of the reasons why their shows look so good and, I hate using this word but it's extremely appropriate here, soulful. So that's that. Now you may be wondering, how much time do they assign to each project? What does the average KyoAni schedule look like? Well, surprisingly enough, it's not that different from your typical TV anime, at least on paper. KyoAni episodes have 3-ish month production windows similar to other shows, and their projects utilize the same cyclic teams within a team approach the rest of the industry uses, with a few exceptions of course. The difference lies in the strong in-house culture that leads to better, more efficient communication between each department, their incredibly capable staff, the healthy, almost family-like atmosphere they've cultivated within the studio, and their organization skills, which are so good that small delays aren't allowed to pile up and compound, and even if they do, they are made up for by healthy buffers between production and air dates. That last point is of particular interest because these days those production buffers are so large that the studio literally has to make it look like things are more last minute than they actually are, just to make sure fans don't get impatient, which they will be once they find out the studio sits on fully finished shows for months on end. Also, if all of that wasn't good enough, KyoAni is effectively isolated from the rest of the industry. They have their own dedicated salaried staff, they don't have to rely on freelancers, and that's a good thing because that makes KyoAni immune to the cutthroat talent hunting that plagues the rest of the industry. Regardless of how many high-profile projects others produce, KyoAni's output will remain the same because they don't rely on outside talent at all. Long story short, all of that collectively leads to healthy staff lists like these. By the way, fun fact, the credits from both the OP and the ED are physically written by mangaka Keiichi Arawi himself, and as Kevin rightfully points out in his article about the show, could you imagine if Arawi was the mangaka of some other series like, say, Dandadan? Poor guy would have to write the names of 20 ADs and f***ing 17,000 second key animators every single week. Thankfully, just a single AD, 0 second key animators, and a small handful of key animators are enough for an average KyoAni episode, so Arawi's fingers are safe for now. It's amazing, isn't it? Gold standard for a reason. Hopefully you guys now understand how and why Kyoto animation shows look as good as they do. Let's now finally talk about City. City the animation is a breath of fresh air, not just for us fans but for the team as well. Having spent years producing serious shows with consistent art styles like Violet Evergarden, Surune and Sound Euphonium, City served as a much needed outlet for the team to let loose creatively. The IP's inherently goofy nature allows for more visual experimentation, be it the more traditionally well-animated shots or the ones that operate on cartoon logic. The thing that stood out to me the most from this show filled with things that stood out to me is the background work. Another quick crash course, an anime screen usually consists of two components, the cell and the background. Cell in this case refers to everything drawn by the animator, not the old school method of coloring. Basically, the background is drawn by the background artist and the cell is drawn by the animator. In this random shot, for example, this is the cell and this is the background. Now, usually it's very easy to differentiate between these two components. If you know what to look for, you can easily tell what's drawn by a background artist and what's drawn by an animator. You can also very easily tell when a background is drawn by the animator. This, however, is not the case with City. The backgrounds in this show look like cell layers. They look stylistically identical to the characters. This is due to a combination of them being untextured, stylized, and drawn using somewhat wobbly lines. This approach leads to a unique style that's very pleasing to look at. Of course, the backgrounds being more cartoony doesn't mean they aren't competent technically, they absolutely are. Art director Shiori Yamasaki's work is phenomenal from a technical point of view. Now, like I said, backgrounds are one half of the equation, one half of the screen. What about the other half? What about the cell component? If the background looks like a cell layer and so does the cell layer itself, wouldn't one melt into the other? Wouldn't the final product look too homogenized? Well, it would, but thankfully the team knew exactly how to avoid that. You know him, you love him, thick lines. Thick lines isolate the cell layers. Thick lines help differentiate between backgrounds and cells. Thick lines rescue children from burning buildings. Thick lines help solve world hunger. Thick lines achieve world peace. Thick lines are good. By the way, speaking of lines, KyoAni is a studio where most frames, both key and in between, are drawn by hand on paper, which in and of itself is a cool little detail, but what's insane about City is that for it, the in-betweens, aka every single final drawing, was drawn using brush pens. What does that mean? That means animators can't erase anything. If they mess up even a single line, boom, that's it. Crumple up the paper, throw it away, and start over. Now, I'm not exactly an animator, but I do edit a lot of videos, and the idea of that convenient Ctrl-Z undo command not existing is terrifying. And this is especially insane because these brush pen lines are drawn by the in-between animators. In-betweeners, of course, usually being the least experienced artists in a team. There's a reason why rookie animators start off as in-between animators before being promoted to key animator status. Like I said, no one does it like KyoAni. Did I say that? I should have. No one does it like KyoAni. Another aspect of this show that immediately stood out to me is the 3D background work, or more specifically the way said 3D backgrounds match the art direction. Now here's the thing about KyoAni, they might be a studio that still draws stuff on paper, but that doesn't mean they are technologically conservative. The studio uses 3D backgrounds, CGI models, and compositing that resembles real-life camera lenses and flares all the time. For City, however, they had to match the 3D backgrounds with the unique art direction, which they did wonderfully. The 3D backgrounds genuinely resemble the 2D art direction, it's insane. This shot from episode 1, for example, not only do the 3D backgrounds have that same untextured, stylized look as the 2D backgrounds, they used multiple LOD models to account for compression. Basically, the more detail a 3D model has, the more said detail converges in on itself when viewed from afar. This is known as compression, and to avoid that, multiple models with multiple levels of detail or LODs are used based on camera proximity. In even simpler terms, this and this are two different models with two different levels of detail. Amazing stuff. You can of course find other incredible shots with 3D backgrounds, but this sequence is easily the most impressive. Also, the highly consistent 2D characters add a lot. Another cool thing about this project is the way it conveys depth of field. It does so not through blurring, but instead through the removal of outlines and the addition of these perpendicular lines. Besides the unique stuff, this show is it's visually interesting. This isn't an animation breakdown, so I won't get into granular detail, but it just looks so cool. The drawings are phenomenal, the style of processing looks vibrant and colorful, and the amount of movement is high, with the style switching between traditional and cartoonish, sometimes in the same sequence. Speaking of movement, City hasn't featured one of those outlandishly over-the-top shots Nichijou is known for yet, but at a technical level, the animation is extremely strong. Be it the insane draftsmanship or the meticulous weight distribution in this sequence, it's such an impressive work. And that should just about do it. It's just a show I wanted to talk about. This video will probably not perform well, but hey, it is what it is. Although you can change that by commenting, liking, and maybe even sharing. A special thanks to Nude03, Pavel, and Damir for becoming tier 3 members, and until next time.